Well, that's us live. So, good evening, everybody. Now, as promised, I've been promising this for a little while now. We have Mitch from Twitter, who's kindly come on to join in the chat. And for those of you that are wondering who Mitch from Twitter is, well, he's here in person. You can see him. Mitch, would you like to cheers? Would you like to explain a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and a little bit of background so that people can relate to what we're going to talk about?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks, Paul.
Yeah,
cheers, Paul. Thank you very much for having me on the program tonight. Yeah. All right. My name is Mitch. I'm from Ohio, here in the U.S. of A. I work as a mental health counselor, specifically in the field of addiction. And I am also what's called an officer of the court here in the state of Ohio, where I consult quite a bit with the state and also work for the defense as well from time to time. So as far as me on Twitter is concerned, a lot of people just know me as just as Mitch. I joined Twitter last year as far as getting on the Making a Murderer thread, so to speak, from our friend whose Twitter title is Truth Seeker. And she helped me get into the community, and I kind of grown from there and such, and met a lot of great friends like yourself, Paul. And I'm certainly become a big advocate for Teresa Hallbach, and of course, and for Stephen and Brandon as well. This has allowed me to, with my friendships that I've made, it's allowed me to come on your show, and then and a couple other things, projects that I'm involved in. That the big one we're talking about, we're going to plug, is for a 80 More Things podcast with Fen and Pom Pom. That we're going to have a two-parter with me that we'd recorded recently, and the first part of it's going to be released tomorrow. And you and I are going to talk a little bit about that tonight. And then I'm also involved in a project with our friend Rubber Ducky. Yes. Yes, a good friend of all of us. And we had our first episode the other night called Altered Crime Time, where we had a kind of a round table discussion about this case and a couple of other cases that happened in Manitowoc that are very linked to what happened to Stephen in both 85 and in 2005 as well. So that's me, and a little bit about me anyway. So, it's great to have you on, and thank you.
And I would have to say that I was very, very pleased when you actually contacted me and said, I'm more than happy to come on and do a chat with you, because we've been we the world, we as in me and his dudeness. I've been trying to encourage people to come forward and express their opinions, and to really give people the true sense of how widespread the outrage at what's happened to, well, as you say, Teresa.
Yes.
The insult to her memory that was the investigation by Wiegert and Fassbender, but also, obviously for Steve and Brendan, that's a given. But I mean, it's good for people to see the broad spectrum of people out there that feels so strongly about this, that they're willing to come on a YouTube channel or to go on to a podcast and talk about these sort of things. So when did you first watch Making a Murderer?
Well, I didn't watch it from the beginning. When it was premiered on Netflix, I kind of caught it through word on the internet, through Google and such. They were plugging it, how good it was. It was the most watched documentary at that time on Netflix. And finally, a couple of months after it came out, my wife Barb, first of all, happy birthday to my wife Barb today.
Yeah, happy birthday.
I got to plug that there. I got to keep her happy.
Yeah.
We decided to watch it on a Saturday, I remember, and we watched the first season all the way through. We binged it. It wasn't because it wasn't entertaining at all. It was sad.
Yeah,
it was absolutely sad from what we both saw, and from episode 1, and I call it chapter 1. You just knew something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. What was being presented there?
Absolutely.
And and you're talking about how people are starting to get out in the world and talk about this, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm certainly not trying to get myself into Hollywood and the movies and all that. No, I'm just trying to share information about the tragedy of this. And there's many more cases out there. The same thing with innocents, people that are in prison for years that are totally innocent. Mm-hmm. And I'm just hoping that by, as Rubber Ducky says, sharing information, we can help all of these people, not just Stephen and Brendan, but there's so many more. So that's how it all began with me. And then, like I said, when I got involved in the Twitter world, that's how the friendships began. I began to learn a lot more than I certainly knew from the documentary. Yeah. And of course, according to our favorite sweaty prize, or as I call him, I call him Predator Kratz on Twitter. Yeah. Everybody knows. Yeah. We were all duped. We were all hypnotized by, because everything was a total lie in his mind, and that everything that Make Murs, said was a lie and wrong and everything. And as we all know, he's just a total piece of work. It's just sad.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The fact that the focus is obviously on Wisconsin with respect to Steve and Brendan, and also Ricky Hochstetler and other cases such as the shooting of Michael Funk by an officer in Nina. And so yes, the emphasis does seem to be on Wisconsin, and I suppose in fairness to Wisconsin, it's not just Wisconsin. Even here in Scotland, I'm being alerted to situations here in Scotland, and certainly in the UK. We've had some very, very famous wrongful convictions where people have been exonerated, like a long time later. But for me, the incredulity of it is the fact that Stephen Avery, having been wrongfully convicted, having done 18 years, the overwhelming evidence that Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department had it in for him, the attorney had it in for him, and guess what? 2 years later, when it's just at the final moments of their whole empire collapsing, and guess what? Teresa disappears. You couldn't write that kind of rubbish, could you? It's
no.
And they expect us to accept. Well, it was. These things can happen, and the Sheriff's Department, they were only there to lend assistance. It just beggars belief, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying not to laugh, Paul. As you said, it's a comedy. It's written as a comedy, but it's a tragedy, and this certainly is probably if quote unquote. I love the word, and I have to laugh. Investigation.
Oh yeah.
This was a sham show, is what it was. And from the get-go, and it was certainly, they were, planning this. They had to discredit the lawsuit, and what better way is to get him arrested for a crime, because that went from $36 million down to $400,000 or something was the settlement, and that's he certainly deserved a lot more, but I have personally, if someone who's been involved with the courts and the people that I've talked with about this case, who I'm going to share in the podcast, and their opinions of what's going on, they have never seen a case with so many mistakes, and nothing adds up whatsoever from a police standpoint, from a judge's opinion, from a coroner's opinion that I share as well, from a crime scene cleanup specialist. We're going to discuss his opinions as well. There's nothing that adds up except the names of the people. That's about the only thing that's the truth about this is the names of the people. Everything else, no way.
Yeah, one of my friends that's been on here before, I don't know if you know of Chad Keller. He wrote the book Beyond Avery Road. And whether you agree with all of what Chad says or disagree with most of what he says, one of the things I find very interesting is the fact that Peg Lautenschlager and Mark Gundrum basically set up this Stephen A. They looked at the Stephen Avery case. They set up the criminal justice reform bill. They looked at trying to make sure that as as Chad Keller puts it in his book, that people in Wisconsin, having civil suits against them is no fun.
No.
And and it was no fun having this civil suit against them. So therefore, they look at how do you avoid that in the future? And all of a sudden, you find that everything that they looked at and said, stuff like no more tunnel vision, in particular. No more tunnel vision. Just looking at one suspect because of the 85 case.
Yep.
And the use of the obviously DNA evidence can be important, but it can also be very misleading.
Yes.
If as he puts it, if Dean and Jerry had put Peg Lautenschlager on the stand and said to her, "Now, what did you think of Mark Regan and Tom Fassbender's investigation?" Oh, I wonder what she would have said.
Oh, it would have changed a few things.
Well, I take it that it's not the done thing. You don't ask the Attorney General to step up on the witness stand and give a critique of her own investigators, because basically Tom Fassbender's from her office, and as presumably everybody in law enforcement is basically her staff, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. So okay, maybe that's not going to be a question that you're going to. You're not going to call Peg Lautenschlager to the stand, but the fact that they didn't even interview Ryan separately, did they? They never questioned him.
No, Ryan should have been suspect number one.
Yes.
Any other place probably in the world he would have been. But again, we're talking about this particular area and what their focus was. And in fact, Ryan should have never stepped 1 foot into the investigation. He should have been a part of no search teams, nothing whatsoever. Yeah. And of course, they allowed him. He was all over this thing like he was one of the detectives. It just another added to the list, because we're joking about how Fenn and Pom Pom are going to need to change their show to 800,000 more things, because it's the way we keep adding up.
Yeah,
how wrong it is. So it's just but you're right. And like what's sad is we got two people that are innocent sitting in prison, and then we have a young lady whose soul is not at rest yet, because we haven't found her, or the real killer has not been, or killers have not been exposed yet.
Yes, I mean, when with a certain amount of naivety on my behalf, when I watched Making a Murder the first time, and I've said this a couple of times, I'm getting into episode 5 and episode 6 and episode 7, and I'm thinking, right, when is everything going to get sorted out so that we get conclusion to this case? When do we get the finalization of the story? We're now 20 episodes down the line, and we're still waiting on this whole story to be sort of revealed, if you like.
Yes.
I mean, for me, I can't get past the fact that Teresa's disappearance was so convenient for Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. Although, as you say, Ryan should be looked at as one of the main suspects.
Yeah,
I'm left thinking, well, either he did it because of his bad temper, and we know of 1 or 2 other people like Scott Taddick with a bad temper, or he was set up, or somebody was set up on behalf of the Sheriff's Department. So even if they didn't actually do the dirty deed themselves, they got somebody to do it for them.
Yes.
How do you feel about this idea that somebody simply did her in and then realized, we can do her in, but then we can blame it on Steve by just framing him? I find that a little bit too, it's like, but why would you murder somebody just because you dislike Steve and Avery so much?
Yeah. Well,
what would be your take on that?
Yeah, well, as we're learning more and more, there's a lot of players involved, and we're learning there's more find out there's more and more and more of these, not just the ones right on the surface. The idea of someone, from a mental health standpoint, from what I've experienced, living with guilt and shame, remorse. Everybody processes it differently, and somebody who commits a crime certainly has the capacity of blocking it, and justifying it in their mind that they did it for the right reasons. Even though they may not be. An addict is really good with that when they're using their drug of choice and they hurt people along the way. They justify it in their minds that it was okay, that this person's going to be fine and such and such. So it's just kind of the way that they process things. So, but the fact that all of these people involved did this for, what we're all thinking, of course, is the lawsuit. There may be more things that we just don't not know yet, but let's just say for the lawsuit, it's just the power of greed and embarrassment, that was, that would motivate them to do such a thing. If they were actually involved in the murder or just fell into their laps perfectly, that's again too much of a coincidence with the timing that she happens to disappear and then she happens to die right then and there, we think anyway. And as well, it's just the timing's too perfect. So, will we find out? I hope. We may not know the entire story completely, but living with guilt and shame is everybody's different. And some people can't do it. I personally think that there may already have, or there will be someone from the bunch that's going to crack and eventually start spilling things. And certainly they're going to have to be tucked away nice and protected, because I could see them having an accident if they start talking. We don't even know. KZ could already have somebody like that we're just not aware of yet. That's already starting to spill the beans a little bit. We never know.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think she's tweeted, hasn't she, to the fact that she has had some useful leads come through, but it would be very irresponsible of her to share important leads. I mean, people like was it Joseph Evans? I think that can be talked about and disregarded straight away. But obviously she's been given some definite leads to go with. It's interesting you talked about the fact how people can that they can kind of justify in their own mind doing something. It's almost as if the end justified the means.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. For the greater good. It certainly sounds like they have a big boys club over there because of the players that are involved. Ducky's talked about this a lot. The players that are involved in '85, the hit and run in '99, and then the 2005 case, they're all the same names.
Oh yeah.
And so again, doing it for the greater good, so to speak. Yes. It's just the whole thing is just, again, the whole thing is just so sad that, that people could do such a thing for whatever reason. There's just no reason why it's good. And then there's innocent victims along the way. And like I said, it's just the whole thing. You wish it didn't happen, but it did. But our friends in Wisconsin, involved in, especially in the Halbach case, did not expect a documentary film crew to show up, who was just doing a thing on Stevens' release from his 1985 incarceration, and then this disappearance/murder falls right into their laps, and then let alone it being released in 2015 and it be such a worldwide phenomenon in the last couple of years. They weren't expecting that.
No, it is. I mean, obviously to a certain extent, yes, maybe Laura and Moira, they struck it lucky, but I mean, when you think about it, with Stephen being arrested in 2005, and that's when they first started following it, wasn't it? It was the arrest of Stephen Avery having been released 2 years earlier that piqued their interest, whereby they went and did this documentary. And of course, it took them 10 years to finally have Netflix decide to run with it, and to do the documentary. So I mean, and then to do a second season, it's been it's been quite quite an epic. Sorry, you have to excuse me. My wife is wondering what I'm doing, but here she comes. She's Yes, absolutely fine, darling. Yes. As I said, the washing machine is going next door, so therefore she's away to check on that. But I have this little sign on the door which says, "Beware of the wife." See? And what I normally put over it is I put this piece of paper that says "recording." But of course, that's out in front of the main door, you see. So coming down the stairs to here, there was no warning, was there, darling? No, there was no warning. So yes. So yeah, 20 episodes of Making a Murderer, and you just. I don't know about you, but I often think about what's going to be the one bit of evidence that's the one thing out of all of this that's going to be, in effect, it's going to be like excuse the term, but what's going to be the equivalent of the 1985 pubic hair? What's going to be the thing that's actually going to get to that Kathleen Zellner is going to be able to test, or has she already done it? For me, the bullet was a huge, huge,
yes,
piece of nonsense. And the hood latch DNA. What's your favourite ones, if you like?
Oh my gosh, where do I begin? Well, the biggest thing which I talk about in the podcast is. These have to be the worst cops ever known to mankind. 7 quote unquote 7 searches of the trailer, and then they find the magic key later. Come on, that was one of the biggest pieces of garbage I've heard. As far as that is concerned, like I said, I don't want to talk too much about the podcast because I want everybody to listen to the podcast. But that was the biggest one right there. You're talking about the bullet thing too, as well. That is absolutely ridiculous, especially where it ended up. Tucked back in that little corner underneath all that garbage, and then suddenly it's there. It just, again, I think what's going to blow it out of the water, I really think, is somebody's confession from the bunch. I just think they're going to debunk everything that's been told because of their personal involvement. And I think that's what's going to help tremendously. And I think she may have somebody like that, or at least getting a little bit of that from somebody, because I'm sure KZ has a lot more information than we all have. And
yes. Yeah. I mean, one of the more sensible things I heard from, shall we say, a semi-guilter was, could it be possible? There was like, thanks, darling. There was like three scenarios. A, Stephen Avery was framed. B, that he was framed. Yeah. B, that he did not receive a fair trial.
Right.
And C, that he's guilty. And okay. In some sort of fantasy world, yes, I can see how those three could all be possible. Well, I think we certainly agree that the trial was completely flawed.
No,
I think we've got evidence that proves that Stephen Avery was framed.
Yep.
It's for me, it's going to be a crux of not just proving that Stephen Avery was framed and therefore, wanting to get Stephen Avery out on a technicality. It's this whole idea of proving who actually did the dirty deed. So for me, that this bloody handprint on the back of the on the RAV4 on the is it the wheel cover?
Yes.
Once we identify who that is. That's going to be significant. I must admit, I followed this case a lot. I am completely baffled as to why there are certain piles of bones spread miles around. We've got this story of Brendan saying, well, Steve got this bucket and took buckets of bones around. He didn't go wandering, a mile away to a couple of bones there, a couple of bones there. Do you have any sense? You know, can you make any sense of what's going on with the bones? Because I am completely lost.
That's another one of those great comedy lines from this whole thing as well with the bones. You know, it's one of the things we talk about it on the podcast tomorrow night, starting tomorrow night. It may not be on tomorrow's, but it's on one of the episodes. The fact that we talk about the temperatures that is needed to destroy a body in the way they claim that it did. Problem number one, we talk about that. Number two, the condition of the bones that they did find doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then again, I'll burn somebody in my backyard here. Then I'm just for fun going to put her here and I'm going to put her there. You know, it just again, another one doesn't add it to the list because it doesn't add up. It's a line I keep saying a lot. Doesn't add up, but it's true. It just no sense whatsoever.
I mean So we've got the bones. That was one of the issues that went back to the back to the circuit court from the Court of Appeals.
And now we got. Excuse me, I was going to say now we got this garbage now that they're claiming that I'm sorry, we gave them animal bones. You know, it wasn't Teresa's bones, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, you can't even lie good. I mean, it's again. Wow. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to jump in.
No. I mean, it's absolutely right. I mean, one would hope that Fallon, Garn, and Wiegert are not that cold-hearted, but you never know.
Yeah.
Are that cold-hearted that they would actually knowingly not give back Teresa's bones to the family? But you never know.
No, you don't. But figure out it's also this was supposedly in 2011. This was before this documentary ever came out, so they didn't expect any attention whatsoever. So
yes, yeah,
again,
yeah. What I was going to have a look to see if I can find. I'm just going to quickly do this. Find the actual podcast so that I can actually put the link in here. Unless I've got any of my useful moderators or admins or whatever the hell they call themselves, maybe one of them can put the link to the 80 More Things podcast. What I was going to ask you though was thoughts on the CD being kept in, because that was the other item of interest for Zellner that got sent back to the back to Angela for her to have a think about it, And what was it? What was it in her final assessment? It took her a week to write each page of her report, of her judgment.
Yeah, a load of garbage again. How many months did it sit there? And then she comes up with that all whatsoever. I would be surprised if she even read it. It's just because there's three little words that seem to don't fit in the vocabulary of the legal system in Wisconsin. Those words are conflict of interest. And even with her and her past judgments in this case, I think in any other state in the United States, I would hope she would not be involved anymore whatsoever. And she's been in it too much. So, but the time factor, the CD, the fact that the CD was, how many years did he hold on to it? Garbage. And oh my gosh, it goes on and on and on, Paul. And and another thing that, again, what words I keep saying doesn't make any sense, but it's there.
Yeah. I was going to mention as well, because you brought it up, the fact that they had 7 searches of the trailer of Stephen's bedroom.
Yes,
and I'm going to keep going on about this because I was on the phone down here speaking with Sheriff Herman about it, and he said it was him that actually brought it up because we were discussing about various things to do with the case, and in fairness, I would say he's a nice fella to chat away to. Would I trust him? I don't think so, but. But we were having a pleasant and it was him that brought it up, and he said, By the way, Paul, you do realise that because I'd sent him stuff about the key, some of the funny cartoons that had been done about it and all that kind of stuff. And he said, you do know that the key was found, all 7 searches. They weren't for hours on end. Some of them were just 10-minute sweeps. And I said to him, Robert, I said, I can tell by your voice you're embarrassed about mentioning it because you know how stupid that sounds. So what you're telling me is that they spent 2.5 to 3 hours on 3 occasions in that tiny bedroom. 4 of them in that tiny. What the hell were they doing?
Yes. One thing I'm glad you talked about that. I think you talked about that when you were on 80 More Things about your invitation to come over there. I'm glad you didn't go meet him because you might have got arrested for something. You never know because you can't trust them. But you're right. The search thing, we've all seen from the videos and from the pictures, and those of us people who have visited over, that trailer is small. And his bedroom is extremely small, and he had so much, stuff in it. There was no room to walk around and all that. But again, these 10-minute searches, these mini searches, whatever they want to call them, total garbage. Because let's just say for 5 seconds, Stephen was guilty. And let's just say the key was there. They would have found it on the first search because they would have torn that room. It's, I'll say it in the podcast, but I'll say it now here too, because that's my friend who was a detective told me as well. The searches that they do when they're correct are like the ones you see a lot on TV. They would have tore that room apart. I mean, absolutely every book would have been torn apart. All the clothes all over the floor, the dressers and everything. Everything to an inch of its life that would have been, that little cabinet that is supposedly shook around and the key fell out. That thing would have been everywhere. So don't tell me you found it. That it took that many searches to find it. Yeah. I don't buy it. No. And so does most of us don't either. So
Yes, yeah. It's one thing though to come up with those. What am I trying to say? What sort of baffles me was the fact that they're actually trying to cling on to stuff like that. This idea that oh, you've got it wrong. It wasn't like that at all. It wasn't like that. You've watched Making a Murderer. It's slanted. Yeah. No, it's not slanted. It's straight down the middle. It's exactly what happened. It's a true timeline of what happened. It's not slanted one way or the other. As I've pointed out, if they wanted to make it really slanted, it was interesting. One of the other things Herman said to me was in the first conversation. He said, "I don't think there was any need to include the Ken Kratz text messages." And I said, well, I suppose you've got a point in regards to, looking at the case. But then when I've actually gone through and looked at the sexting career of Ken, you think you get a better picture of and you're the ideal person to talk to about this, the mentality of Ken Kratz.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's why I like what you're doing, because you're going through the cases there, of his what he was doing with the sexting as well, and his behaviors and his blaming of a disease. The disease made him do it, and all that garbage. And it was never verified that that he was under any kind of treatment whatsoever. What he was saying, I'm a sex addict, I'm hooked on Vicodin and all this kind of garbage he was saying. But okay, let's just say for 5 seconds, let's say he is still responsible for his behaviors. That's the thing. Addict or no addict, he's still responsible. And nothing can make you, in my world of mental health, nothing can make you do anything. It boils down to a choice. So, he chose to do those things.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, he was chairman of the Crimes Victims' Rights Board, and what's really interesting is the fact that it was actually, it was for attorneys like Ken Kratz that the Crimes Victims' Rights Board was set up in the first place.
Yes.
That's what I find really, really strange. They should have hauled the Crime Victims' Rights Board should have hauled Ken Kratz as their chairperson in front of themselves.
Yes.
And they should have really torn to shreds. And yet you've got nearly a year goes past, and everybody thinks, well, if we just keep this quiet, we might just get out of this. Where have we seen that before? Let's just hush it. Let's just hush up the fact that there was this, this Stephen Avery fellow that did 18 years. He's not a very nice person anyway. Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. It kind of reminds me of those of us who know the Silence of the Lambs movies, those kind of things. If you watch the movie Red Dragon, which was the prequel to Silence of the Lambs,
right.
Hannibal Lecter was helping the FBI investigate murders that he was doing. So that kind of reminds me right there with Kratz being on the board and then doing the garbage that he was doing. So it just.
Yeah,
it's so sad and comical at the same time, Paul. It really is, with everything with him. So
yeah, I mean, what I am noticing, or what I did notice when I went through the DOJ reports, was the fact that he didn't just target women from sort of one particular background. As far as he was concerned, there was a field out there of prey for him to go and prey on, and it didn't matter whether it was a little field mouse or an eagle in the sky. Whoever is out there, he was determined to go and try and sort of make advances towards these women. And when you hear about some of the things that he liked to talk to women about what he likes to do to them.
Yeah,
and I kind of thinking that there's almost and again, you're a mental health sort of counselor. Is there almost a little bit of him that doesn't actually like women?
Yeah,
that he feels that he wants to be that he needs them to be subservient, that he needs to have that power over them.
Exactly. A lot of times when it's similar to people who maybe or someone who is a survivor of abuse when they were young, and then they become abusers. When they get older, it's kind of we may find out maybe one day that he had his own issues when he was a child, so to speak, and this contributed to it as well. But he also a lot of people in our Twitter world and such like to call him a narcissist, and it's such. And I mean it's a good definition, but for me, as someone who, in my opinion, he's just more of an addict, which and he has a lot of what's called grandiosity. It's all about him, about his needs, and that he's number one. You do what you're going to do what I say because it's all about me. And so, he's got a lot of things going there, and he still does. And he still does.
Yeah, and it's almost as if it's like, I am such a wonderful person. How can you best show your love for me?
Yes,
because I'm this wonderful person. It's
kiss my ring, please. Yes, you should be. Yes.
And to get back to sort of Robert Herman's question, which was initially to do with, did that need to be shown in Making a Murderer? You could say, well, maybe not, but does it have a huge bearing on if for me, if it had been a Dean Strang or Jerry Buting type lawyer who was the prosecutor,
yes,
if it was somebody that was that came across and you could see was trying to be fair, then you can look back on this case and you could say, well, that it was simply mistakes that were made. That it was a case of mistakes. But when you consider Ken Kratz, Fallon and Garn, you think, no, this isn't just mistakes. This was deliberate. This was all about getting Steve at all cost.
Yes, absolutely. And I think adding it in was perfect because you just saw the behavior of this Mr. especially Kratz, and things that he did that were so unethical and so wrong. And so but then then throwing in what happened to him, just kind of described him, exactly. So I'm glad that they did. And the things that we have found since Making a Murderer came out too. I said this a couple of times too. Okay, let's just take Making a Murderer out of the equation for a moment. Let's say it just never existed, and we just discovered this stuff about Stephen through the internet world. Okay, and we all got on board and started helping. The things that have been discovered in the last 3 years through truthers and armchair detectives, we call sometimes ourselves.
Yeah,
we have found more than enough to show this thing is totally wrong. Make a Murder out of the way, we still can prove this thing was totally wrong.
Yeah,
and the whole thing. Like I said, I use the word investigation in quotes because this was no investigation whatsoever.
No.
It was a show. It was just a show.
Yeah,
So again, I hope that we do get resolution soon, especially with Brandon, with the clemency coming up. I'm hoping that he does grant it. I think that certainly will help Stephen with his case as well. So, but unfortunately, state of Wisconsin is going to drag this thing as long as they can with Stephen. So,
yeah. I've got a few sort of almost conflicting thoughts about Brendan. I would absolutely love to see Stephen Brendan home straight away.
Yeah,
of that there's no doubt. On what terms is the sticking point with Brendan? Is it a case of you accept that you're guilty, but we're going to let you off because you've done 13 years? Well, to me, that shouldn't really be on the table. And to me, that's a little bit like this Alford plea that people have mentioned, which seems to be a complete fudge. As far as Kathleen Zellner is concerned, there's talk about the fact that the sort of political way out of this would be to say, right, we're going to let you both go on the understanding that you never ever talk about any of this ever again. Just go home and just live your lives to the end. Is Kathleen Zellner going to allow that to happen? I don't think so.
No.
I mean, I'd like to see some good come of this eventually, because I think that from what we're seeing, as you said, in Wisconsin and other places, but we're focusing on Wisconsin. There's been certain things going on there that isn't just about making a murderer. There's other things as well. And what we really need is, as somebody once famously said, we want the bad cops to be afraid of the good cops, not the other way around.
Yes. Yeah, we need a complete resolution. Now, I said I don't want them home. I want them home, like you said, both of them tomorrow if it could, but not on a technicality. No, I want them home because they're 1,000% innocent, and this is why they're innocent. And that coming out, and everything involved, that was involved in this setup, and the real killer being, and prosecuted as well. I just don't want a technicality to come in the way. I mean, I want them home with a complete resolution of everything, so that way Teresa could be at peace.
Yeah, I mean, if it has also been suggested that if for example, if Governor Eva suddenly said, right, I want Stephen Brendan released, on certain conditions or technicalities. It's been suggested that, for example, even if somebody took an Alford plea, that the lawyers could continue to look into that case, and eventually they could go back to court and try and prove innocence. But for me, it's like, well, are you really going to do that once somebody's out? Is there going to be an appetite to keep pursuing a case?
Yeah, an interest, because they're out. Yeah. Are you gonna put the time that you've been putting in it before now afterwards as well?
Yeah. I can see Tony Evers having a huge dilemma, wondering what to do with this Brendan, because he's basically being asked to overrule what his own previous attorney generals have been doing in their department, and he's being asked to overlook all of that and then look at it and say, to really look at Brendan's case, obviously in this case, his all they've got against him is this confession, which was never a confession. It was just him agreeing with
repeating what they wanted to hear. Yes.
But politically, is it such a good idea for him if he wants to run for governor again to let them out? I have a huge problem with this idea that every new person that comes into office in politics, they want to be seen to be taking action against crime.
Yeah.
So my worry is that people, he's going to see this as being some sort of backward step on his behalf.
Yeah, and for him, he's not going to win either way. We hear what we want to hear, yay, but then it's got the other half's not going to like it. And then if he rules against it, we're going to have our world's not going to like it, the other half's going to like it. He's not going to win whatever way he goes. And so he's in a very difficult situation there as far as the decision that he has to make and live with the decision he makes. So that's a tough one.
I suppose that in a way, is it a case of if he was to do that, it would set a precedent that has never been done before? I don't know. Is it something that's common?
Not common.
So otherwise, they would have been quoting other examples where other governors have done the same thing.
Yes, something with this much spotlight on it. You know, and it's getting more and more because as we're seeing now, Hollywood is getting involved with Kim Kardashian, who gets a lot of spotlight, being involved as well, and other former politicians that were in good standing, voicing their opinions as well. So this thing, it's getting all over the place. Whatever decision he's going to be making, it's going to hit a lot of places. As far as how it's going to affect people.
Yep.
So,
I mean, obviously the thing is, if he did let Brendan out, I presume then that the guilters are going to harp on about this murder in the park scenario. I don't know if you've watched the Murder in the Park film.
I have not. Only did about the five.
Sorry. That was the Central Park 5. The Murder in the Park one is where this Professor Protus gets and his students get somebody else, get this Story Simon, to confess to having done murders that this guy Anthony Porter was about to be executed. 48 hours before he gets executed, they come up with this. It's not him. It's just Story Simon. And so, of course, Ken Kratz is busy, talking about this Murder in the Park documentary because it is an example of where you can put pressure on, particularly from the media. You can put pressure on the state to say, you need to let this killer go free. In the case of Anthony Porter. And of course, the interesting thing there, of course, is that A Murder in the Park is a film documentary by Sean Reck, who's doing what's he doing? Convicting a murderer or
convicting a murderer. Yeah, I heard of that. Yeah, that one. So
anyway, that's I'm glad we kind of touched on that because I must admit, I don't know about you, but I've got conflicting thoughts about it. It's not a straightforward. It's either black or white. It's like there's that. For want of a better word, there's 50 shades of grey. I didn't mean to say that. You know what I mean? It's like there's no sort of you do. I don't know. Do you find you have sort of different thoughts about the? Well, what should happen with Brendan?
It's like you said, it's not cut and dry. It's not a simple yes or no. There's going to be a ripple effect. There's going to be consequences either way he goes with it whatsoever. So there's just not, we all want to hear yes, release him. We all on our side, of course, the guilters want to keep him in, but there's not going to be one answer that's going to make us all happy. And so you're right. So whatever's going to happen, there's going to be problems, no matter what it is.
Okay, yeah. Mitch, I'm going to ask you one more question then, and then I'll let you go to it.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Thoughts on guilters? Who are they? Where do they come from? What are they? For me, I can't help thinking that a lot of them have got some vested interest in this case. They are either in law enforcement, or they are related to a law enforcement, or they know somebody in law enforcement. Or is it just the fact that from a sort of psychological point of view, having been told and having been shown and having been told about this, the press conference, this guy, Stephen Avery, and basically being convinced that, well, Stephen Avery did it and he's this terrible person, they just cannot get past that in their head. Their hatred of Steve is blinding them to anybody presenting any truth about the case.
Yeah. And yes, well, first of all, I just don't think there's that as many as they claim to be. As well, for starters. Number two, there's an awful lot of hostility when you read their posts, and when they're voicing their opinions about something that maybe a truther said. There's a lot of negativity as well. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of positive reinforcement there at all when they're talking about what they want. Those type of people just like attention. They like to rebel, as well. So they're comical at the same time, but I just think they're kind of people that just enjoy fighting as opposed to resolving. That's what we want on our side. We want resolution here, as well. But I don't think they do. They just enjoy the fight, especially a negative fight.
Yeah, you've actually reminded me, because I've had a couple of comments there from Eric Jose, and he and I'm not going to name names, but he was telling me about a guy that went. I think they were at school together. And this guy just goes on the internet and will just try and argue with anybody and put people down, and he's just basically trying to be any opportunity to be nasty. He goes out there to be nasty because he can hide behind a computer screen.
Yes. And a lot of times, especially in the mental health field, people who are trying to hide something or have things in their own life that are unresolved get hostile, and then they bring up another fight to what's called deflect off what's going on. So guilters might have things going on in their lives and they don't want to address them. So I'll argue about something else. So that takes them out of the spotlight, so to speak.
Yeah. Change the subject. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, listen, Mitch, it's been absolutely great pleasure. I'm really pleased that you got in touch with me to agree to come in and having a chat with me, because it's as I say, it was something that both myself and the dude and a few others have. We really feel that the need to show the whole community. We're real people, we've got real jobs, we're not interested, as I said once before, we don't wake up every morning thinking, now, what can we do today to undermine the state of Wisconsin? We're just looking at it from the point of view that, we're just ordinary people. So I would like to thank you very much for coming on and spending some time. And because we haven't really had that long, and because I know you're going to be spending a lot of time on 80 more things. Would you come back and have another chat?
Absolutely. I would be honored to come back, Paul. And our buddy Eric Jose, I know I talked to him about coming on his show, so I'll be happy to do that as well. Listen, everybody listening to the podcast. It's very informative, and I hope you enjoy it. And as well, at the same time, real quick, I want to give a quick shout out to a couple nice people that on our one of a couple truthers, our friend Paula G. Everybody knows Paula. And then, of course, our friend Sarah from the UK. Both of you, I love you both very much, and thank you, Paul, again for your time and for everything that you do. I enjoy all your programming as well. So thank you, Paul.
Well, thank you for coming on. And with that, let's say cheerio and look forward to the next time. Thank you very much.
Paul.
Cheers.
Cheers, Paul. Thank you.
Bye.